a series of studies that have been done at Yale, this from Professor Taylor and his team with his postdoc, Tamir Aldad, where they took mice and exposed them to cell phone radiation and watched their behavior of the offspring when they became adults. Now, it's easy to study mice because it takes them only 3 weeks to be reproduced. He was particularly interested in attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, sometimes called ADD, and wondered whether cell phone radiation might have any effect, being aware as an OBGYN of the growing number of pregnant young women who are on their phones a lot. So he looked at the question of fetal brain programming, because we know, as I showed you from the earlier slides, how rapidly the brain grows during pregnancy and even in the few years after birth. In fact, we know from studies done in neurotoxicology that lead exposures that take place before age 2 to a young child can have an effect on that child's adult intelligence and behavior. So the question he asked was, is there an effect of cell phone radiation on the developing brain? He set up a study with a silenced cell phone. There was no sound coming out of it. It was simply programmed to give it a cell phone signal using an ordinary phone at the time set up right next to the water bottle of the cage. So the exposures were really not that high, but mice drink a lot all the time. And so the mice were exposed through that route. And what he found was that prenatally exposed mice to radio frequency energy, also known as microwave radiation, created adults with significant behavioral impacts. They had poorer memory, they had more hyperactivity, more anxiety, and they had less fear. Less fear. Inappropriately less fear. Other studies, by the way, that I can't show you today have been done with humans, and they have found that cell phone radiation actually reduces your reaction time. So you get faster with cell phone radiation, but you make more mistakes. So think about that next time you're driving and talking on your phone. Does prenatal cell phone exposure reduce the number of cells in the thinking part of the brain? This is where we think. Is there an effect of cell phone radiation with exposure taking place during pregnancy? Now, whether or not you're a histopathologist, and I would ask, is anyone here a histopathologist? These slides you don't need to know anything about to be able to understand how beautiful they are. This is elegant work from my colleague Suleiman Kaplan in Turkey at Samsun University. And it shows clearly that the controls not exposed to cell phone radiation have nice, regular, round cells. Cells are supposed to be organized and coherent in order to function and to tell one another to repair themselves, to die at the right time. Those directions come from organized cells. These are the exposed cells. And you can see here that they have less order and there are fewer of them. Now, these two studies, one from Turkey and one from Yale, and by the way, the Yale study was published in something called Scientific Reports, which is a Nature publication, show that the answer to the question is yes, prenatal cell phone exposure does reduce the number of cells in the thinking part of the brain. And again, here you see this further enlargement of the fewer brain cells and their lack of order after prenatal exposure to the rat brain. Well, for one thing, it's very technical, and it's quite complicated. But as I said at the beginning, I figured if this was a problem, I'd know about it. After all, I was a scientist working with some of the smartest people in the world. The reason we don't know more about this is that there are very few studies that are really relevant. You'll hear occasionally, no longer by the way, from industry the assertion that we have 10,000 studies showing that cell phones are safe. You don't hear that anymore because you don't have 10,000 studies. We have almost no research underway in the United States except for one large animal study that was begun in 1999 and expects to be finished, I think now in 2015. That tells you a lot right there.